Hello and welcome. I'm Samantha Mackay, lead trainer at Truity, and today I'm talking with founder of Enneagram and Marriage, Christa Hardin, who has been a relationship coach and family therapist for over 20 years, and she's an Enneagram 7 like me and uses the Enneagram as part of her relationship coaching practice, which I'm excited to learn more about today. Thanks for joining me, Christa.
Thank you so much for having me, Samantha. That's awesome. And I can't wait. It's so fun talking to another 7.
I just have to try and keep us to time. That's my focus.
Yes, 100.
So tell me about Enneagram and marriage. Like how did this come about? What inspired it?
I was taking a lot of marriage inventories and doing a lot of assessments. There was a time when I was a master's level psychologist and I was the main assessor at my psychology group. And it was just taking people and me hours and hours to assess. And then when I heard about the Enneagram from a really good, soulful Enneagram 4 therapist friend, she said, look at Enneagram a little deeper because at first you look, you get a number, and it seems very cursory and not like very much. And she said it's a lot like the layers of an onion. There's just so many different parts to it. So, because she was a healthy 4 and a great therapist friend, I looked again, thankfully, and found that it was such a jewel for individuals and couples.
That sounds amazing. So I'm curious because I mean, relationships are such a huge part of our
Mhm.
lives and they can be
Mhm.
so tricky and challenging to navigate at times. So,
Mhm.
what I suppose are some of the core challenges you've been seeing in marriages and how does the Enneagram help with that?
What really is happening with couples is every single person who calls our center, because we have a local counseling and coaching center, or contacts me through one of the Enneagram and marriage outlets, they always want help with conflict. What really is at the heart of people's struggles is I'm trying to use my defense mechanisms, you're trying to use yours, and they're rubbing up against each other in a really bad way. And they're not just from the last 5 years or 10 years or however long we've been together, they're layered from generations before. And we have painful stories and beginnings as to why we use those defenses. So the
Mm.
Enneagram has been very helpful to give couples some answers as to why these conflicts are happening, as well as some tools to get them out of it.
So, can you give me some examples? Like how does the Enneagram
Mhm.
help couples?
Well, for instance, my husband and I, when we discovered we were a 7 and a 1, we were able to do different marriage work. We had all the Gottman tools, all the Sue Johnson tools. These are people who have been the marriage researchers for good reason. They're go to experts who help us to do the deep emotional work and to look at nonverbals and to take date nights. But they couldn't nuance us deep enough for our types and these defense mechanisms I'm talking about. So, when a couple learns their types, just like this happened with my husband and I, you start to realize, oh, you're really getting on my nerves sometimes, but you have a really good reason. And knowing that and having compassion for your spouse changes everything. Because before we have a bit of a fundamental attribution error and we think that we are the ones in the right and they're the wrong. We're the hero, they're the villain. And now all of a sudden we're two broken people who have gifts and scars and wounds, and we can begin to give each other a bit more grace. So that's really the journey that we take together.
So it's really bringing in that compassion to open the door to a different conversation.
Mhm. Exactly. That's what the transition looks like. And it isn't that we dismiss the other great tools about how to get to know each other better or how to have conflict or how to compromise. This just allows us to do that from a very base level because a lot of the time before it was like, why should I compromise? They're just being rude. And now it's, oh, they're being rude because they're hurting and they're wounded and they're protective. And here's why. And so that gives you a different momentum of, oh, I want to help them. I didn't realize that they were so broken. I love them and I'm broken too. So there's this permission that comes with the compassion too for just being human.
So, what are some of the common combinations you see in your practice, and what are some of the challenges they're coming with, and how are they navigating those?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say one of the biggest combinations is 9 with all different types, and 9s and 7s have so many commonalities, and I see this combination a lot, but also so many trigger areas. So, for instance, with this kind of pairing, a 9 really wants to be heard and seen, and a 7 is out there and commands attention fairly naturally. And so it can really make the 9 feel hurt and angry and sad. And their wound really is at the core. I guess I'm not important. I guess people don't see me and care about me. But what's beautiful when they start to get their shine, or what I call their glow, together is they can truly help each other. The 9 can bring what they have as a typical peacefulness of just, hey, I'm not important anyway. I'm just going to go chill by myself and get comfortable. They can bring that to a 7 who truly needs that comfort and rest space. And then the 7 can really, a bit aggressively in a good way, come and show everybody how great the 9 is. They can fight for the 9 and carve the path for them. So it's an exciting combo. And if they care for one another's hearts and they really see, oh, wow, one of them is anxious, the 7, and they need somebody to help them rest. And oh, the 9 doesn't feel heard and important. When they know these things, they just tend to fight for each other a lot harder and to give one another a lot of grace. So, but yeah, I see that a lot in the 7 and the 9. And then I also see that a lot in the 2-5.
So tell me about the 2 and the 5. How do they show up? That must be really different from the 7 and the 9.
It is. The 2 is usually, again, very extroverted, but the 5 this time is often very introverted. And you also have a lot of the classic, although we don't want to stereotype, femininity, classic femaleness of the 2 sometimes going, okay, I want to go out, be social with my girlfriends. And I, like I said, occasionally you see it in opposites, but just in most cases, you're going to see there's very few that I've at least researched male 2s, although there are some. So, and then what you get with a 5 is somebody who's like, I know who I am, and I happen to have a lot of what are usually characteristic of masculine traits: logic, using, smaller focused words, very detailed. And it's definitely, once again, there's a bell curve and people fall in the outskirts of it. But in general, it's a very big, as you can hear me saying, opposites attract pairing. So they can kind of pass as 2 ships in the night in terms of perspective sometimes, of we should be together all the time. We should be extroverting. We should almost be fusing codependently from the 2 perspective because they're such nurturers. And you almost think of 2s as like a mother and Eve. And then the 5 is very stoic and guarded and says, we can't overdo on resources. So as you can imagine, this is one of my favorite pairings to watch over years longitudinally, because they really start to ebb and flow together. And I'm like, why are all these 2s staying home and reading? Why is their self-esteem going up? Oh, because they're with these 5s who are letting them focus and they're helping them mentally. And then why are these 5s not now being dragged but brought to things? Recently, a 2-5 couple told me, wow, after 30 years of marriage, the 5 is actually even occasionally bringing the 2 out. So it's been fun to watch these iterations in all the different ways they can grow if they can stick it out together through those painful losses too.
Because that's one of the things that the 2 has to learn, is to take time for themselves and to be alone. And I can imagine how the 5 would make space for that, because that's something they naturally want to do anyway. Yeah.
Yep. And they help them to see it's okay.
Yeah. And it's great to hear of the 5s getting out more. That's good.
Yeah. Oh, this pairing just gives to each other so much. But sometimes, they have to do things on their own, drive separately. Okay, the 2 needs more friends because the 5 is not going to change that much. It's slow little iterations over years.
Right. Okay. And they are at sort of opposite ends of the Enneagram, like the 7 and the 4. I think the 4, I've loved 4s now. I've learned to love them. But at first, those 4s are a bit terrifying, all that emotion so easily expressed that 7s can struggle with at times.
That's a really good point. Yes. These are challenging, but yet really rewarding pairs and journeys.
Absolutely. Okay. So for someone either by themselves or as a couple wanting to get some help in their relationship, what should they keep in mind? What should they look for?
I think that it's so wise at different seasons of your life to get help, because you need to have that third party perspective when you're lost in all of it. It can get very messy, and just remembering that we're social creatures first and foremost, and not shaming yourself for needing help is huge. Every human needs help. We wouldn't even be doing this podcast or this experience, this interview, if we weren't having some assistance, somebody with tech somewhere in the world. So just them first remembering it's okay and taking that deep breath. And then the next thing I would do is I would look for somebody who's really well versed in the Enneagram, because after we talked today, you remember me saying, I did all these assessments for years. They were thousands of dollars for people, and then also 20 hours for me to work up. None of them were as efficient and deep as the Enneagram. So if you can find somebody who knows the layers to work with you, and there's a lot of coaches out there, then I think you're in good hands. I have some Enneagram and marriage trained coaches also on my team, but as long as you go to a good Enneagram coach, that's a good start. However, I also want to add, it's also nice to get somebody who has marriage experience, because there's something that I feel about a lot of Enneagram coaches is they might forget that marriage research has been going on for so many years before people started to get into the Enneagram for the last few years. So if you can find somebody who knows how to do both, you really have a lot of help.
So someone who specializes in marriage or relationships as well as the Enneagram is a good starting point. What happens if your partner doesn't want to go with you, or if you're single, or at the really very beginning of a relationship and your partner might be like, it's too early. We're not broken yet.
That's a great question. And I think that in general, if your partner doesn't want to go, doing your own work is so rewarding. And I've had a lot of people start with me. And what's fun about that is they start and then their partner hears about it and sees their partner becoming more vulnerable, more compassionate. And then they want to get in on it too. Especially because one of the things I train every Enneagram and marriage coach with is always honor the person not in the room. I don't care who it is, whether it's an ex-boyfriend who's probably going to be back in the picture anyway, whether it's a parent, whether it's a spouse that's not present. Always remember their people too. If they're alive, there's hope for that person. So we always consider them. And that way they're not like, I'm sure we've both had experiences, and maybe everyone listening has had experiences where somebody goes to therapy and then they literally say, my therapist can't stand you. My therapist says you're selfish. My coach doesn't think you've treated me fairly. That is not helpful for their relationship. So a good coach or counselor knows that and is really guarded to honor everybody. And that way, when their partner is finally interested in doing their own work, they're like, come on in. It's a safe place. We're here for you. And hopefully they're going to feel honored by that person.
That just gave me chills. Like honoring the person not in the room just gave me, I love it. So beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm so glad. Live and learn.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than coming out of someone who's meant to help you with this negativity associated with this person. You've got this complex relationship you're trying to unravel. I mean, that just complicates things.
Right. And it's our natural countertransference to feel excited when our client says, hey, like this is really, I love our bond and you understand me more than our partner. But a good coach can guard for that and just be aware, your clients are going to see you in a very limited perception. They're not going to have the full view of you either and your imperfections. So understand that you don't take that in and ingest it and talk bad about their partner. And I think that when you can help them to hold space, but also show them support, because it's also frustrating if you go to your therapist or coach and they're like, well, I just think your partner sounds so great and you're the hot mess. You want to have a lot of empathy from them for you too. And if you can have that balance, it feels it feels like you're saying, just very healthy.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a truly wonderful, vivacious, beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me, Christa. It's been truly wonderful. And I know you mentioned it before, but how can people find you?
Thank you so much. Our podcast is Enneagram and Marriage at Apple or Spotify, or they can also find us at Instagram, Enneagram and Marriage. And then last but not least, the website I mentioned, enneagramandmarriage.com. We've got lots of blogs for you, lots of free resources. We also have Truity's amazing, you can find some of our work at Truity as well for the couple pairing guides. So all over the place.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so excited. Well, thanks for talking with me today. And I look forward to hopefully catching up with you again soon.
You too, Samantha. Thank you so much for your amazing questions. Those were awesome.
Thank you.